Okay, in this annex part of the garden, let's start over here with the potatoes. See a little bit of pest pressure, probably from the Asian beetles. When I see them, I just pick them off. I don't think I'll do anything substantial in the pesticide department. The leaves are still large enough, they're still lush enough that they are providing plenty of energy to the tubers that are growing beneath the ground. And that brings us up here to the trellis. They're all on this side, they're right to the top. This side is getting close, they're going to meet in the center. On down through the trellis as we walk through here. Some of those Asian beetles have been affecting the vineyard. You can see the work that they've been doing here. We have a number of leaves that they eat them so much that they look like a piece of lace. Here's one right here. You see that? Yeah. Anyway, but I'll go in here and pick them off one by one. If I have a little jar of soapy water, just flick them into there and they're done. But look at the crop of clusters that we have. Quite significant. Wish it had been a little bit more rainy in the spring and the summer, and then it needs to dry off in about August. That's really what wine grapes need. They need a real dry portion of late summer to intensify those sugars in the grapes. So back around this way, we have our yellow beans. Got a few in there, way down deep. And they're coming on, so there's a couple here. We'll be able to start picking beans this week, I'm sure. Very excited about that. Carrots are doing fine. We did have a fail on carrots right through here. Those carrots that I had the boards on. They just couldn't take the lack of water. I couldn't keep them watered enough. There's a couple of them in there, but certainly not quite as many as I had planted. So, oh well, it's always a learning process. Over here, the lettuces, they're beginning to bolt. The freckle romaine still isn't. I've been picking that. I'll probably pick the remainder of that in the next day or two. This butter crunch has bolted. I may leave a few to collect seeds from, otherwise it's going to the chickens. And this is red sails down there. I'll leave a couple also for seeds. On this side, the pride of the patch, right here, you can see camouflaged underneath here is our big sugar baby watermelon. He's huge. Anyway, we have probably about 9, if not more, in this patch, which sounds like a success to me. We have one even over here that's nestled right amongst the onions. And the onions are growing well. We had rain last night, so I'm sure that they're loving it. Not ready to harvest yet. When you harvest onions, they start to turn brown, and then they'll fall over right here at the stem. Just flop right down. And you know, then that's time for harvesting. Usually it's after my garlic, and my garlic's not ready yet. More potatoes here. You can see that they've been munched on a bit also. These guys are dying off at the tips. I'm thinking perhaps they are getting ready to give up, and then that would mean a harvest of potatoes. Okay, so that's this garden bed on the tour. Remember I let a radish flower and go to seed? There's the flowers. And if you can see, the whole plant just took off. And here's all the seed pods. They'll elongate even more, maybe to about 3-4 inches at least, and each be filled with, oh, I don't know, perhaps 7 or 8 seeds. So I'm going to have plenty of radish seeds for next year. So the zucchini plant, I have one growing. That's the green one. The yellow one is an unfertilized zucchini. When the female flower has the unfertilized portion at the bottom of its flower, it swells a little bit, but when the flower is not fertilized, it just will turn yellow and the flower will fall off. And then this is just a part that's not going to thrive. There it is, like that. But that's okay. I'm hoping to have more. I may have to revert to pollinating them myself, but we'll see. We're still early in the season. Here's another one you can see. If you can see this one down in there. That's my shadow. There is one there. You can see how it's turned yellow. Actually, there's 2 down there. Here I am sitting next to the orphan tomatoes. These are Solano grape tomatoes. There's 2 plants and they are so vigorous and so prolific. Next to them is the Wisconsin 55s. I'm pretty pleased with them. They're a smallish but very sturdy upright tomato. And down there at the other end are a plum tomato called Plum Regal. And those are rather a surprise too. They were just an experimental one that I decided to grow. You can see there. Jay asked a question on compost. Well, this is my compost setup. I have 3 bins. Each one are in a different stage of development. The first one I have covered basically to keep the chickens out. This one's pretty much finished. Has a little ways to go, but not much. See, it's nice and loamy. And this could go directly onto gardens now. I may put it on a garden in the fall after my produce is all harvested. If not, I will use it in the springtime. The next one over here is an active pile. Active meaning I'm adding materials to it. I just added some foliage from Bleeding Hearts in here. You can see the leafy structures. I turned it over using a pitchfork, my tried and true pitchfork. Again, a gate in front of it to keep the chickens out of it. They would do a very good job helping in the decomposition area, but they'd also spread it out all over the place. So I kind of want to keep it contained. Anyway, and over here is another one. This is not even as further along as the other one. This has a lot of straw in it and pine shavings, the beddings from the chickens. I do throw some green stuff in here every once in a while, but mainly it's just a slow compost. I turn it every once in a while. I move the whole structure over to here, and then pitchfork everything here over to the new one. That way it keeps it aerated. Speaking about aeration, you need to aerate your compost pile. It needs oxygen. It also needs water. It doesn't need to be sopping wet, but it does need to be moist. It helps promote the beneficial bacteria in the decomposition of of your matter. As far as what you put in a compost pile, you need brown materials and green materials and water and air. So like 4 elements. Brown material are things like leaves, leaves from the tree, especially in the fall. You get plenty of them, at least around here. I get a lot down here in this area. I've taken a whole bunch of them. The chickens scratch it up and peck it up and break it up, and they actually do a nice job breaking it down for me already. Also, what would be brown is what's in here, the straw and the pine shavings for the beddings. Green stuff, of course, is your vegetable matter, and that's from kitchen scraps, vegetable kitchen scraps. No meats, no oils. Those do not play well with a compost pile. They just bring in varmints and things that you really don't want in your compost pile. Okay, so my compost pit situation here, 3 different piles. I would suggest at least 2. One, which is kind of a standing working pile that doesn't need anything added to it, just needs further decomposition. The other one would be an active pile that it's actively working. Your compost pile should be heating up. It should be up into the 140s, 150s, 160s internally in order for it to work very well. I don't have a compost thermometer. They sell them, but I just water it, add to it, and turn it. Okay, thanks for the question, Jay. I hope this helps. There, I found a shady spot to answer some more questions. In addition to the composting, Joellen's got a great compost going over in Sodas Point. She's using worm castings. So she uses worms. She's got a setup with different trays, and it's making all sorts of good beneficial castings that she can put in her gardens. Katie's also using a composting system in her backyard. I've actually taken her a couple loads of dried leaves to use. Here's a tip for using leaves. If when you rake your leaves in the fall, they're going to be large leaves. I'll put them in a big trash barrel and then use my weed whacker and put the weed whacker down in and whirls it all up and chops them up into a very fine composition, and that helps with the decomposition of those leaves because they're already broken up pretty finely. So that's a tip if you have a weed whacker and a large trash barrel and you have some oak leaves and maple leaves and elm leaves and all those other kind of leaves in the fall that all fall off the trees, and that helps immensely to compost your compost in the compost pile. Okay. Question. Kristen had a bunch of questions, 2 questions actually. On the forum, Grandpa posted, Grammy has the garden of her dreams. And I responded, almost. Kristen wants to know what I mean by almost. Well, a gardener never has a perfect garden. You're always looking to grow or expand or change. Grammy has some ideas for more garden space next year. You'll just have to wait and stay tuned until next year. I want to expand just a little bit more. Every year I rotate things, I move things around. At least no more than 2 to 3 years in one spot in the garden does a single vegetable grow. I like to change them around. You got to fool those pests and insects, which is a question that Dan has asked that I'll get to after I finish Kristen's questions. So anyway, It's almost my garden of my dreams. More coming on that front. Okay, she also talked about the cantaloupes and why I'm putting cantaloupes, tying them up when the fruit is going to be so big and heavy at the end. Won't it fall off? Well, yes, it will fall off, but I have a plan. First of all, I'm putting the cantaloupes on trellises because it saves space. Because in Grammy's garden of her dreams, the cantaloupes would be able to just sprawl out and go wherever they want on a nice bed of straw or something like that. But since I don't have that much space, this is a space-saving technique to have the cantaloupes grow up. So when the cantaloupes start to form, we have the fertilization between the flower, male flower and the female flower, and there are that. Then the cantaloupe gets to about, I don't know, 3 inches or something like that. I've saved all my bags from my potatoes and my, some potatoes and onions, those mesh bags. I'm going to put that little cantaloupe inside one of those and tie it up onto that trellis. So as it grows, there's plenty of room in that bag, it will be supported on the trellis itself and is not going to be so heavy that it pulls itself right off before it's ripe off of that plant. So I hope that clears things up a little bit. I probably wasn't specific about that when I was talking about cantaloupes when I first posted that in a video. Okay, Dan talked about pests in the garden. Oh yeah, there's lots of pests in the garden, including chickens. That's why I put a fence around to keep them out. There's all sorts of pests. There's big 4-footed mammal pests like deer and all sorts of groundhogs and you name it, even dogs. You got to keep them out. That's why I have a fence. Although my fence really isn't that high to keep deer out. But there's also birds. Birds are big pests in the garden. Certainly they like berries, and my cantaloupe and watermelon might be a target for them later on. But we'll see. I'll just have to deal with that as I see it. So far, so good on both the mammals and the birds. Now we get to things like insects. Insects are a big problem. Asian beetles this year look to be kind of maybe getting on the nasty side, especially in the vineyard. They're onto the potato plants. Not so much that I think they're gonna, do irreparable damage. The leaves still have a firm hold and a way to make the energy for the fruit and stuff. So insects, I am not seeing too much problem. There are cabbage moths. I put the netting over the broccoli and the cabbage to keep the cabbage moths from laying their eggs, and the eggs will hatch, and then the larva will eat the leaves and eat the vegetable part of it too, and just decimate the plant. So that's the way I'm combating that. There are potato beetles and squash bugs. I haven't seen any of those yet. I keep looking. You can usually see the little eggs. They're little white eggs that oftentimes they lay them on the underside of the leaves. Sometimes potato beetles will gnaw off the stalk at the base of the potato vine, and also tomato. They attack the tomatoes also, but I haven't seen any of that. The tomato plant would have just fallen over, and so far so good. Nothing like that. There are also nematodes, which are like snails and thin slugs and things like that, which they cause a concern. I haven't seen any this year. I have in the past had slugs. They would eat marigolds, they'd eat tomatoes, and I would pick them off. A non-invasive way is to put out a dish of beer. I know, Dan, you're horrified, but I just get the cheap stuff, so don't worry. And they're attracted to the beer, and then they drowned in the beer. I guess they drowned happy, right? Okay, so that's another pest. But there are also many beneficial insects and things like that. We talked about we need the pollinators, the bees and things like that to pollinate our flowers, to grow our vegetables. Also, dragonflies are really good in the garden. Ladybugs are really good. They eat aphids and other insects like that. Frogs. We have Spotty the Frog. I've seen a couple Spotty the Frogs this year already. And I'm sorry, Abby, but snakes are really good in the garden also. At least the garter snakes. That's basically, if we have anything, that's what we have around here. They will eat bugs that are harmful to the plants. But anyway, that's about it for the garden pests. So thanks for the question, Dan. Oh, a couple things of what I'm doing in the garden this past week. Always watering. We had another very dry week. We got a little bit of rain last night, about 0.6 yesterday and last night. Enough to really help, I think, the plants. We also had some wind, though, along with that. West wind that blew over a lot of things. So this morning I had to stake up lots of things, like the sunflowers and the peas that weren't holding on to the trellis. Some of those blew down. Tomatoes, they needed restaking in some spots that I didn't get to. So a lot of tending to do today. One thing we talked about with water last week, and I said that it was important to water at the base. Did a little bit of reading and things like that, and actually lettuce actually benefits from a little foliar watering. So don't worry too much about trying to keep the water at the base of your lettuce. That's got to be difficult. So now back to what I've been doing. Some things are coming out of the garden. The lettuce is bolting, so most of that is chicken food now that I take to them every day. And those spaces where I have now open spaces where the lettuce was, I've got to think about what I'm going to replant in those spaces. Things I can replant. Lettuce, not yet, too soon. Lettuce and spinach, it's really too early, but I will replant some of those probably in August. I can plant more beets, more carrots, more cabbage. If I had some plant starts, I'm going to go to the nursery and see if I can get some more cabbage. And Coop likes cabbage. Okay. Good for you, Coop. Okay, so other things I've been doing besides trying to figure out what I'm going to plant in those blank spaces. Tying up my tomatoes. I'm watching for disease, like in the pest department we talked about disease, insects, and spottings and things like that. The cantaloupe, tying that up. They're suggesting to prune your zucchinis and your squashes and things like that. You don't want their leaves overlapping to create too dense of shade. You want some circulation. So if you have leaves that are overlapping, cut out one of those leaves and so you can keep the airflow open under there, because that harbors powdery mildew, which will kill your plant for sure and destroy your harvest. So prune some of those overlapping, like zucchini are notorious for having big leaves that just overlap all your fruit and everything. So the sun really needs to get to all of the leaves, and if a leaf's not getting it, then cut it out. So that's basically all I've been doing this week, besides trying to keep cool. Isn't that a pretty astilbe right there in the background? I love it. So nice this time of year, and the hostas are starting to send up their flower stalks. This is a particularly beautiful one. These leaves are about the size of a dinner plate. They're very, very pretty. This here, this is bleeding heart, and those are some of the leaves that will die down that I put out in my compost pile. This plant in particular, this one is still green. I'm gonna until I see some yellowing on this plant, I'm just gonna kind of leave it. The other plant was down the hill there. So anyway, thank you for another good week. Thank you for watching. Keep your questions coming. I'm gonna announce the winner for the question of the week. Jay was the winner last week. I'm still getting your gift off to you, Jay. It's coming. Maybe you'll win again this week. We'll see. Okay, bye everybody. Keep on gardening, and we'll see you next week.